The look on Karen's face when I pulled out my agricultural inspector badge is something I'll never forget. 1 minute, she was screaming at the 911 operator, and the next, she was fumbling for words as I handed her the warrant. But let's back up a bit. This 3-month ordeal began with one entitled Woman's Vendetta against my perfectly legal urban farm and ended with her being led away in handcuffs. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and if you've ever had someone try to mess with the wrong person. What happened after that is exactly why investing in security cameras turned out to be the smartest thing I ever did. My name is Corbin Martinez, and I'm a 35-year-old agricultural scientist, as well as a single dad to my 8-year-old son, Noah. 2 years ago, I lost my wife Maria to cancer. Before she passed, I promised her I would teach Noah where real food comes from and how to be self-reliant. It was a dream we'd shared for years. After Maria died, I used her life insurance payout to buy a foreclosed house in Meadowbrook, a peaceful neighborhood with good schools for Noah and a huge backyard where I could finally make the dream real. I left my lucrative corporate job to launch a sustainable urban farming initiative, hoping it would help Noah and me heal by growing food together. Every evening, I'd talk to Maria's photo, telling her how our garden was coming along and how Noah was adjusting. It was my way of keeping her spirit with us. I had spent a decade working at Agric Solutions, developing ways to make urban farming viable. The irony wasn't lost on me that while I was helping big companies make millions, my own family barely saw me. Maria's diagnosis forced me to rethink everything. During her 18 months of treatment, we had long conversations about what truly mattered to family, meaning, and teaching Noah lessons that would last him a lifetime. We sketched out plans for a little urban farm on the back of a hospital notepad in between her treatments. "Promise me you'll show him where real food comes from," she said one of her last days. Not just the grocery store. When I found that neglected house in Meadowbrook with its half-acre backyard, it felt like Maria was guiding me there. I had no idea buying that house would put me squarely in the sights of Karen Dalton, the 47-year-old president of the Homeowners Association, whose failed real estate ambitions and need to control everything around her became my nightmare. I later discovered that Karen had been trying to snatch up that same property, planning to flip it through her contacts at Westfield Properties. From the moment I moved in, she made it her personal mission to drive us out. Before the 2008 housing crash, Karen had been a somewhat successful realtor. But when the market tanked, she lost everything, her savings, her reputation, and was left with nothing but debt and a tarnished credit score. The HOA presidency became her fiefdom, a place where she could claw back a sense of power. Her husband Greg, a mild-mannered accountant, never openly defied her, always looking exhausted. Their teenage son Brandon was every bit as entitled as his mother, but without her manipulative flair. It all started with the snide remarks. Every time I was outside, digging or planting, I'd hear whispers of "There go the property values. What kind of man plays in the dirt all day?" I tuned it out and stayed focused on building raised garden beds and putting up a small chicken coop for fresh eggs. Noah was still reeling from losing his mom, but he found comfort in caring for our chickens, Nugget and Sunny. The garden was helping us both heal. Slowly but surely, I poured everything I knew from my years of work into that backyard. The beds were laid out in a modular pattern, companion planting kept pests at bay naturally, and I built a small greenhouse for our seedlings. We used an efficient drip irrigation system to save water. It wasn't just functional, it was beautiful. Some of the neighbors were impressed enough to stop by and compliment the setup. Aaron and Judy Harrison, who lived across the street, even brought over a welcome basket and seemed genuinely supportive. Daniel Foster, a retired judge who lived next door, became a regular visitor and often brought Noah books about gardening and nature. Then one evening, Noah came home crying, his shirt ripped. Karen's son had shoved him at school, saying, "Your dad's a crazy vegetable man, and you're both getting kicked out of the neighborhood." I tucked Noah in that night with Maria's photo by his side. As I walked back to the kitchen, I saw a shadow near the fence. It was Karen, snapping photos of my backyard from the street. I set Maria's photo down on the table and whispered, "What should I do, honey?" The bullying didn't stop there. Noah's teacher, Miss Patel, called to tell me Noah had been eating lunch alone for weeks. "He's a wonderful boy, Mr. Martinez, but he's withdrawn. Is everything okay at home?" she asked. I explained our situation and she promised to watch over him, suggesting that joining the environmental club might help him connect with other kids. I agreed and even offered to give a talk about sustainable farming to Noah's class, hoping it would help him make friends. But word of that presentation somehow reached Karen, and she called the principal to complain about me pushing some May agenda. The talk was postponed indefinitely. The next day, I called Jessica Williams, an old friend from law school who now worked in city planning. We'd met during an environmental law seminar while I was working on my PhD, and she'd always been passionate about urban sustainability. When I told her what was happening, she quickly agreed to check the local ordinances. "Don't worry, Corbin," she said after reviewing the county's database. Meadowbrook actually encourages small-scale agriculture. Your setup is completely legal, but given everything you've told me about this Karen woman, document everything. I'd recommend putting in security cameras, just in case. I chose a high-definition wireless camera system with night vision, motion sensors, and cloud storage, giving us full coverage without feeling too invasive. Setting it up turned into a father-son project with Noah, who seemed to understand more than I realized. "Are these for catching the bad people, Dad?" he asked as we fixed a camera near the chicken coop. "They're to help keep us safe," I explained, trying to be honest without scaring him. "Sometimes people don't understand things that are different, and our farm is definitely different from the other houses here." The setup cost almost $800 money I hadn't expected to spend. But within a week, I knew it was worth every cent. Karen's harassment turned from hushed gossip to an organized campaign. She formed a so-called Save Our Neighborhood committee and started distributing printed flyers on every doorstep in a 3-block radius. These handouts warned about insect invasions, poisonous pesticides, and rats supposedly drawn by my farm. Complete fabrications, since I only used organic methods and kept everything spotless. One flyer even suggested our chickens might be carrying avian flu that could infect children in the neighborhood. The lies were infuriating, especially since she'd never once asked how we actually ran our farm. I saved every flyer, carefully filing them in a notebook. Maria had always been the one to keep track of everything, and Noah's doctor appointments, home maintenance schedule, so now I found myself taking on her meticulous habits. I created a detailed timeline of the harassment, noting dates, times, and any witnesses I could find. It felt like she was guiding me from beyond, helping me defend what we'd built. Jessica helped me draft a cease and desist letter to address Karen's false claims. We kept the wording firm but not too aggressive. "We need to show you tried to resolve this amicably," she explained. "If this blows up, and I think it might, it'll be important to have proof that you took reasonable steps." The letter demanded that Karen stop spreading false health claims about my farm and warned that if she kept it up, I'd take legal action. Dropping that letter in Karen's mailbox gave me a small surge of confidence, like I was finally pushing back instead of just taking it. But instead of backing down, Karen doubled down. Through Aaron Harrison, I learned she was holding weekly concerned citizens meetings at her house. Aaron reluctantly went to one, pretending to get an emergency call to slip out early. "Corbin," he said the next day, genuinely disturbed, "she's showing people doctored photos of piles of garbage and standing water that don't exist in your yard. She's telling them your farm will bring in rats and mosquitoes that carry West Nile virus, and she's claiming you're selling produce illegally without any health inspections." The lies were becoming more elaborate and potentially damaging. Aaron suggested I start recording my interactions in case Karen or her supporters confronted me. I took his advice and began carrying a small digital recorder whenever I was in the yard. I also started a blog about our farm, complete with dated photos of everything to prove that our space was clean and well managed. Noah helped too, snapping pictures of our tidy chicken coop, neat compost bin, and healthy vegetables. "We're like garden reporters," he said with a proud grin. I realized that documenting everything gave him a sense of control and purpose after so much uncertainty. Our first direct showdown came on a Saturday morning when Karen showed up on my doorstep with a man she introduced as a county inspector. I had been expecting some kind of escalation after sending the cease and desist letter, but this was more brazen than I'd anticipated. The man wore khakis and a polo shirt, holding a clipboard with what looked like official forms, but he had no badge, no county logo. Noah hid in his room, scared by the loud knocking, while I stepped outside to keep them from entering. "Mr. Martinez, this is Harold Jenkins from the county zoning office," Karen announced, her voice dripping with smug satisfaction. "He's here to document the violations we've reported." The man shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes as I calmly but firmly asked to see his county ID and an official inspection notice. After some awkward fumbling, he admitted he wasn't from the county at all. He was Karen's cousin, a real estate appraiser. The papers on his clipboard, just generic forms he'd printed from the county's website. "This is trespassing under false pretenses," I said, holding back my anger. "I'm going to have to ask you both to leave right now." Karen's face turned bright red when she realized her little stunt had failed. "You can't hide those violations forever," she snapped as she stormed back down the driveway. "The real inspectors will be here soon." I watched them leave, then went inside to comfort Noah, who had been watching from his window, clutching his mother's photo to his chest. "A broken bar." "You were really brave, Dad," Noah said, and his quiet words filled me with a fierce determination. I wanted to show him that standing up to bullies was always the right thing to do. That night, the security cameras caught someone sneaking onto the property. They cut my irrigation lines and scattered what looked like weed seeds into the vegetable beds. The figure moved with the awkward gait of a teenager in a hooded sweatshirt. I couldn't see the face, but the build matched Karen's teenage son, Brandon. The sabotage was deliberate, targeting the drip system I had painstakingly installed and focusing on our heirloom vegetable beds and the crops that would be the hardest to replace. I spent hours that night going over the footage, torn between anger and a cold sense of vindication. This was exactly why I'd set up the cameras, but watching someone methodically destroy what Noah and I had built felt like a punch to the gut. That irrigation system had been a labor of love, designed to save water and deliver just the right moisture for each type of plant. Every cut in the lines erased hours of careful planning and seconds of spiteful destruction. Repairing the damage cost me almost $300 in materials and a whole day of labor. I had to cancel our trip to the Science Museum with Noah, and instead, I brought him out to help fix the beds so he wouldn't think we were giving up. The worst part was seeing his face when he discovered his cherished heirloom Tomatessa Cherokee purples that Maria had loved laying limp and broken. We'd saved those seeds from the last tomatoes Maria had enjoyed during her illness, and Noah had tended them like precious treasures. "Mom would be so sad," he whispered, gently touching the dying leaves. "She loved tomatoes." I held him close, swallowing back my own tears. "We'll replant them," I promised, my voice calm but my fury simmering beneath the surface. "We'll make them grow even better than before." But inside, I felt my resolve harden. This wasn't just about me anymore. They were going after my son's hope. The next day, I filed a report with Officer Hernandez. He listened patiently. His mother had been a farm worker, so he understood, but he explained that he needed more evidence before taking action. "Document everything," he advised, "and if things keep getting worse, broken bar, maybe think about moving." But moving wasn't an option. This was our home, where Noah and I were trying to build a new life. That night, I found Noah sitting by the window, his eyes scanning the yard with worry. "Why do they hate us, Dad?" he asked. "I want to go to Grandma's house." I hugged him close, torn between my anger and my determination. I couldn't let Karen win, not just for my own pride, but to show Noah that we don't run from bullies. His grandmother lived in Arizona, too far for regular visits, but close enough that it was tempting to consider starting over. For a moment, I imagined packing up and leaving the hostility behind, but something inside me wouldn't let go of this place. Maria and I had chosen this house together before she passed. It was part of her legacy for Noah. I remembered her fierce resolve during her illness, how she'd refused to give in even when it seemed hopeless. "We don't run, Noah," I told him that night. "We stand our ground when we know we're right, but we'll be smarter and stronger about it." We turned upgrading the security system into a science project. Motion-activated sprinklers, bright floodlights, and alarms all installed with Noah's help. It gave him a sense of control, something to focus on in the middle of the fear. While researching local codes to make sure I stayed within the law, I stumbled across something that changed everything. Karen was deeply tied to Westfield Properties, a developer trying to build a luxury condo project called The Meadows in our neighborhood. They needed to buy up a few more properties, including Mania, and Karen was getting paid for every house she convinced someone to sell. It explained everything: the urgency, the lies, the sabotage. Public records showed Westfield had already snapped up 4 homes around us, and they needed at least 3 more to meet a deadline for tax breaks. My property was a strategic corner lode of prime real estate they couldn't ignore. Karen wasn't just being petty, she was under pressure to deliver. I decided to invite Noah's class for an educational tour of our little urban farm, explaining sustainable agriculture and letting the kids collect eggs and harvest vegetables. The teacher and several parents were impressed, and soon word spread that what we were doing wasn't just legitimate, it was educational and community building. Karen, however, escalated her harassment. She'd stand at the property line, filming and shouting about privacy violations whenever we had visitors. She reported our compost pile to the health department, claiming it attracted vermin and smelled awful. The health department inspected and quickly dismissed her complaints. Our compost was clean and well maintained. The farm tour changed something in Noah. Seeing his classmates excited about what he and I had built gave him a new confidence. He started bringing friends over after school, showing them the chicken coop and teaching them how to identify different vegetables. One afternoon, I overheard him telling a friend, "My mom would have loved this place. She designed a lot of it before she had to go to heaven." It was the first time I'd heard him talk so openly about Maria with other children. Despite Karen's efforts, progress was happening. One evening, I found myself reading through Maria's old journal, searching for guidance. I found an entry from her final days: "Teach Noah to stand up for what's right, no matter how hard it gets." It strengthened my resolve. The next day, I learned that Karen had once been investigated for market manipulation during her real estate days. This whole role was her attempt at redemption. Meanwhile, Noah was growing stronger, helping me in the garden and keeping a farm journal, just like his mother once had. Adam Clark from the county's Agricultural Extension Office became an unexpected ally. He visited our farm and was impressed with what we'd built. "You should apply for the upcoming part-time agricultural inspector job," he suggested. "It would give you official standing in the community. With your background, you'd be perfect." The position would involve inspecting urban agricultural projects, exactly my area of expertise. I applied, hoping it might offer a shield against Karen's growing attacks. But Karen didn't stop. She used her influence to block a delivery truck carrying my organic fertilizer, forcing me to haul the materials myself in small carloads. She doctored images of my farm, adding fake rats and insects, and shared them in the neighborhood social media group. Any supportive comments were mysteriously deleted. When I was summoned to an HOA committee meeting, I saw firsthand how Karen had built her power base. The board had 5 members: Karen herself, 2 elderly residents who seemed half asleep, and a married couple who looked nervous whenever Karen spoke. I presented clear documentation that I was fully compliant with regulations, but Karen dismissed it, claiming the board had community standards beyond written rules. When I mentioned her connection to Westfield Properties, the room fell silent. Karen quickly adjourned the meeting, citing time constraints. As I was leaving, Lisa Garretta, a nurse and single mom from down the street, whispered, "Not everyone agrees with her. Some of us are just too scared to speak up." Late one night, my motion sensor tripped. The cameras captured Karen and 2 HOA board members sneaking into my garden for an unauthorized inspection. The motion-activated sprinklers soaked them all. Karen screamed threats as she fled. "I'll make you lose everything, including that brat." Noah clung to me, shaking with fear. "I'm scared, Dad," he whispered. Looking at his frightened face, something shifted in me. Enough, I thought. This wasn't just about the farm anymore. The cameras had caught everything, including Karen's threat. I showed the footage to Officer Hernandez, who agreed it was trespassing. But he warned, "These neighborhood disputes can turn ugly. Consider if that's the path you really want to take." I wasn't interested in escalating, but I couldn't back down either. I needed to protect Noah and our home. Jessica advised me to send formal notices to all 3 trespassers, documenting the incident and warning them against any future intrusions. Paper trails matter, she said. Build your case methodically. The next morning, I found an official-looking letter from the HOA in my mailbox. It demanded that I cease all commercial agricultural activities within 7 days or face legal action. The language was deliberately intimidating, citing obscure bylaws and threatening $100 fines for non-compliance. They claimed that my farm didn't fit residential aesthetics, of phrases I'd never seen in the community guidelines I'd been given when I bought this house. I read the document aloud to Jessica. After a moment of silence, she laughed. This is legal nonsense, Corbina, pure intimidation tactics. They're counting on you not knowing your rights or not having the resources to fight back. She asked me to send her the digital copies of the HOA bylaws I'd received when I bought my home. Within an hour, she called back with interesting news. The current version on the HOA website has been altered, she explained. The section prohibiting commercial farming, it wasn't in the original document you received. I can prove it using the document metadata and digital signature, as Karen retroactively changed the bylaws without a proper vote or notification process. She showed me how the PDF timestamps revealed the documents had been modified just 3 weeks or long after I'd purchased the property and started the garden. Jessica laid out our counter strategy. We'd file a formal challenge with the County Housing Authority, documenting the altered records and requesting an independent review of the HOA's governance. This is fraud, plain and simple, she said, her professional indignation clear. We'll be methodical and thorough. Don't engage directly with Karen. That's what she wants. Let's handle this through official channels. As we worked on our formal challenge, I discovered I wasn't alone. Other homeowners had also been bullied by Karen when their choices didn't fit her narrow vision for the neighborhood. An elderly couple had faced harassment over their solar panels, and an immigrant family had endured baseless noise complaints after a cultural celebration. Karen's oppressive hold on Meadowbrook was more far-reaching than I'd imagined. Each conversation revealed more people who resented her but felt powerless to stop her. Meanwhile, Karen escalated her tactics. She filed for an emergency injunction using falsified evidence about alleged health hazards. The paperwork, delivered by a process server who looked embarrassed by his task, included blurry photographs of supposed insect infestations and water contamination stemming from my property. Most infuriating was the petition attached as an exhibit, with 27 resident signatures demanding immediate action against my farm enterprise. She claimed I was endangering neighborhood children, using child safety as a cynical weapon. I wondered if so many of my neighbors had truly turned against us. The next day, Aaron Harrison knocked on my door looking troubled. I need to show you something, he said, holding a clipboard. It was a copy of the petition Karen had circulated. She told us it was for a community garden initiative, he said, clearly embarrassed. The document claimed to support regulated green space to boost property values. Most people signed without reading the fine print or the attached exhibits, which were added later. Aaron wasn't alone. In the days that followed, several other neighbors came forward, shocked to learn how their signatures had been misused. They thought they were supporting community beautification and not legal action against my family. Daniel Foster, the retired judge next door, was particularly outraged when I showed him the court filing. This is petition fraud, he declared, scrutinizing the document with practiced eyes. I practiced law for 40 years and I know deception when I see it. These signatures were obtained under false pretenses and attached to a completely different petition. The preliminary hearing for Karen's injunction was scheduled for the following Monday at the county courthouse. Jessica prepared meticulously, gathering affidavits from neighbors who had been misled about the petition, organizing photographic evidence of our farm's real condition, and compiling expert testimonials about the environmental benefits of urban agriculture. Noah would have to miss school for the hearing. I couldn't leave him home alone to worry about the outcome. Daniel offered to testify, too. At 73, he carried significant weight in the community and wasn't afraid of Karen's intimidation. I've been watching how you work with Noah, he told me one evening on his porch. What you're doing matters not just for him, but for every kid in this neighborhood who now understands where real food comes from. When Maria passed, you could have retreated from the world. Instead, you built something beautiful and educational. I won't let her destroy that. Daniel's support strengthened my resolve. But I worried about Noah. He'd started sleeping with his mother's photo clutched to his chest, and he asked questions in the dark that cut deep. "Dad, if we have to move away, will Mom's garden die?" I reassured him that we weren't going anywhere, but the uncertainty weighed on both of us. On the morning of the preliminary hearing, Noah clutched my hand tighter as we climbed the courthouse steps. Jessica had every document, every affidavit, every expert statement ready. Karen arrived with 2 HOA board members and a slick attorney from Westfield Property as a confirmation of the connection she had always denied. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, listened carefully as both sides presented their arguments. She reviewed the paperwork and seemed skeptical of Karen's claims but clearly concerned about the rising conflict in the community. "This appears to be a neighborhood dispute that has escalated unnecessarily," she said, removing her glasses. "Mr. Martinez's activities seem well within residential guidelines, but I understand the HOA's concern about precedent." It wasn't a victory, but it wasn't a defeat either. As we left the courtroom, Karen smirked and whispered to her attorney just loud enough for me to hear, "He'll be gone within the month." Noah, who had been brave throughout the proceedings, finally let the tears fall once we reached the car. "Why does she hate our garden so much, Dad?" he asked. I had no simple answer for my 8-year-old son. How could I explain that his mother's memorial garden was threatening someone's financial kickbacks and fragile sense of control? That same afternoon, while Noah and I were still trying to process the hearing, Karen launched her next attack. She hired a landscaping crew that accidentally sprayed herbicide onto our garden, destroying the school project Noah and I had been cultivating for his science fair. The workers claimed they'd misunderstood the property boundaries, but the damage was precisely targeting only our heirloom vegetables and a butterfly garden Noah had planted in Maria's memory. The ornamental plants nearby were left untouched. Finding Noah crying beside the withered stalks of what had been thriving tomato plants that morning shattered me. His small fingers traced the brown leaves gently. "That wasn't just plants, Dad," he sobbed, shoulders shaking. "That was our project with Moma. She helped us pick those seeds before a broken bar before she went to heaven." I held him as he cried, my own eyes burning with unshed tears. This wasn't just vandalism, it was an attack on Maria's memory and Noah's healing. Through a mutual friend, I learned that Karen's husband, Greg, had confided that Karen was taking prescription anxiety medication and had become obsessed with what she called the neighborhood destroyer, her private nickname for me. Her fixation had only grown after Westfield pressured her about the timeline for acquiring my property. Greg seemed caught between loyalty to his wife and discomfort with her methods, occasionally making apologetic eye contact when we crossed paths, though he never openly contradicted her. A nurse named Lisa Garretta, another single parent in the neighborhood, had confided to me that she'd also been harassed by Karen over something as petty as non-conforming flower colors. We started documenting Karen's harassment, building a case. But the threats became more explicit. A note in my mailbox read, "Sell or suffer consequences. Think about your son." My car was vandalized in a supermarket parking lot, windows smashed, tires slashed. Around the same time, Westfield CEO sent an offer to buy my house at an unusually high price, accompanied by a veiled threat about upcoming legal difficulties. A contact at the county records office shared documents with me that proved Karen was receiving illegal consulting fees from Westfield in exchange for helping to facilitate property sales. The pressure was mounting, and Noah began having nightmares, waking up crying for his mother. His teacher called me, concerned about his sudden withdrawal. "He was doing so well with the garden club," she said. "Now he barely speaks during class." I tried to explain the situation in the simplest terms possible, but how do you tell an 8-year-old that an adult is systematically trying to destroy your home? Instead, I focused on what we could rebuild. We replanted the damaged sections with new seedlings. We created a memorial garden just for Maria, using her favorite flowers and a small fountain that Noah helped design. "Mom would have loved the sound of water," he said as we arranged the stones around it. Returning from the farmer's market one Saturday, Noah and I were shocked to find animal control and police officers at our house. Karen stood across the street, camera in hand, smirking. "I reported dangerous wild animals," she said loudly. Noah burst into tears as the animal control officers inspected our chicken coop. "Are they going to take Nugget and Sunny away, Dad?" he cried, clutching his favorite hen. The officers quickly determined the chickens were legal pets, but the incident caused a neighborhood spectacle and more bullying for Noah at school. After the other officers left, a kind woman named Brenda stayed behind. Karen then filed a lawsuit against me, claiming emotional distress and property devaluation. Around that time, I received documents from a former colleague about a fraud case Karen had been involved in at her previous company. The matter had been quietly settled thanks to her political connections. The protest itself was more for show than substance. Only about 8 people participated, and most of them looked distinctly uncomfortable. Aaron Harrison later told me Karen had threatened to report minor HOA violations against anyone who didn't attend. Meanwhile, a small but growing circle of supporters began to form around us. Daniel Foster organized a petition supporting my farm as a neighborhood asset. Lisa Garrett started bringing her 2 children over for gardening lessons. Even the middle school science teacher asked if we could develop a curriculum partnership. Each small gesture of support strengthened my resolve. The breaking point came one midnight when loud banging woke us up. I opened the door to find Karen standing there with a triumphant look and an unfamiliar police officer beside her. "I've reported illegal business activities, and we have a search warrant," she declared. Noah hid behind me, clutching his mother's photograph. As the officer explained, they were investigating a report of illegal commercial activity and unpermitted structures. After a thorough inspection of the property, the officers found no violations. Karen lost her composure, screaming accusations right there on my lawn. The officer, clearly uncomfortable, tried to calm her down, but she wouldn't be silenced. Neighbors began to emerge from their homes, witnessing the unhinged behavior for themselves. "You're all going to regret this when property values plummet," she shrieked at the gathering crowd. "I'm the only one protecting our investments." Greg appeared, trying to guide her back home, but she shoved him away. It was a public meltdown that exposed the desperation behind her campaign. Noah watched the scene unfold from the doorway, his expression shifting from fear to something closer to pity. Calmly, I produced my new credentials. I had just been appointed as a part-time agricultural inspector for the county, with investigative authority. My official ID badge bore the county seal and a photograph of me, alongside text outlining my jurisdiction over agricultural practices, environmental compliance, and land use regulations. Karen stared at the badge, her face pale with disbelief, as if she couldn't process how quickly the tables had turned. "I'm officially opening an investigation into HOA activities," I said, specifically regarding their relationship with Westfield Properties and any potentially fraudulent real estate practices affecting agricultural land use. "Thee's a broken bar. This is some kind of joke," Karen stammered, her voice rising with every word. "You can't just become an inspector overnight. Who would even hire you?" But the officer beside her had already examined my credentials and stepped back respectfully, recognizing their legitimacy. "The Agricultural Commission appointed Mr. Martinez last week," he confirmed, clearly uncomfortable with Karen's escalating behavior. "His credentials are valid." Karen's face drained of color as the reality of her situation settled in. Her shock quickly turned to rage. "I built this neighborhood," she shrieked, her voice cracking with emotion. "I've spent 5 years of my life making Meadowbrook what it is. I won't let you destroy it with your broken bar, your urban farming experiment." She gestured wildly toward my garden, nearly striking the officer in the process. Neighbors gathered at a safe distance, watching as Karen's carefully curated facade of neighborhood leadership crumbled before their eyes. My appointment had come through just the day before, after an intensive interview process in which I laid out a plan for expanding urban agriculture throughout the county. Adam Clark had championed my application, highlighting both my academic background and the model farm I'd built. The timing couldn't have been better. During the interview, I'd emphasized how sustainable urban farming could be seamlessly integrated into existing residential communities without disrupting neighborhood aesthetics or cohesion. The commission members had been especially impressed by the educational component I'd developed for local schools. using my own property as a case study to demonstrate the benefits of sustainable agriculture. What Karen didn't realize was that my new role granted me legal authority to investigate environmental violations like the misuse of herbicides that I documented after the landscaping accident. I also had jurisdiction over fraudulent real estate practices that affected agricultural land use, including attempts to block lawful farming through false claims or manipulated HOA rules. The badge I showed her was no bluff. I carried real authority, backed by the county. Noah had emerged from behind me, his wide eyes taking in the scene. Karen finally stormed off, half dragged by her embarrassed husband, who had arrived during her meltdown. My son turned to me, a mix of awe and confusion in his voice. "Dad, are you really an inspector now, like a policeman for gardens?" he asked, his tone more curious than frightened. I knelt to his level, aware that the neighbors were still watching from their yards and driveways. "Something like that, buddy," I told him gently. "I'm going to help people grow food safely and make sure nobody stops them if they're doing it right." I wanted him to understand this wasn't about revenge against Karina. It was about protecting something his mother had valued deeply. The next day brought an unexpected wave of support. Daniel Foster organized an impromptu neighborhood meeting on his spacious front porch, a neutral space for concerned residents. Nearly 20 neighbors came, including several who had previously sided with Karen out of fear or misinformation. With Karen notably absent, people began sharing their own stories of her intimidation tactics, arbitrary fines, selective enforcement of HOA rules, and veiled threats. Lisa Garrett revealed that Karen had threatened to report her to the nursing board when she voted against a special assessment Karen had proposed for community security improvements, which conveniently included cameras aimed at my property. Aaron Harrison described how Karen had engineered the removal of the previous HOA president through a campaign of rumors and procedural manipulation, all because he opposed the initial negotiations with Westfield Property. It wasn't just about Corbin's farm, Daniel explained to the group. That's just the latest and most visible target in a pattern that's been building for years. Now, we finally have a chance to restore proper governance to this community. The meeting ended with the formation of a neighborhood advocacy committee and plans for an emergency HOA board election. Several neighbors volunteered to review financial records and bylaws that had previously been tightly controlled by Karen. Noah watched from the porch swing, eyes wide as he saw adults working together constructively. "Are these all our friends now?" he whispered, hope flickering in his voice. "I think they might be," I answered honestly, surprised by the sudden shift in the community's mood. Karen's response came swiftly and desperately. By evening, she had filed for an emergency restraining order against me, claiming I was obsessed and stalking her. Her filing was full of wild accusations, that I'd been photographing her home, following her to community events, and using my government authority to intimidate her. She even claimed I had manipulated county officials solely to target her, painting me as an imminent threat to her safety. The courthouse clerk who processed the paperwork later told Jessica that Karen had been highly agitated, insisting the order be granted immediately without the usual review. When informed that this wasn't possible, she demanded to speak directly to a judge, claiming her life was in danger. Recognizing the name from our previous court appearance, the clerk flagged the filing for special attention. Jessica and I came prepared. We presented video evidence of Karen's repeated trespassing and property damage. The investigation uncovered that she had received over $50,000 in illegal kickbacks from Westfield Properties. In a final act of desperation, Karen called 911. Falsely claiming I had threatened her with a weapon, prompting an armed police response. But at the restraining order hearing, her credibility collapsed completely. The judge reviewed our timeline of events, security footage, and multiple witness statements from neighbors. "Mrs. Dalton," the judge finally said, her tone stern, "this court finds your claims not only unsubstantiated but potentially fraudulent. I'm referring this matter to the district attorney for possible charges of filing false reports and abusing court resources." Karen left the courtroom shaking, her attorney looking grim. That evening, Greg came to my door alone. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "She's not well, but that's no excuse. I should have stepped in sooner. My security cameras captured Karen and a Westfield employee breaking into my garden shed late at night. carrying a suspicious bag. When I turned on the floodlights and confronted them, Karen panicked and dropped the bag, shouting, "You can't prove anything," before fleeing. Inside the bag were banned pesticides. I picked it up with gloves, shaking my head, and called Jessica. "It's time to use the arrest warrant," I said. "I have irrefutable evidence." The pesticides were identified as chlorine-based compounds, banned in the United States since 1988 because of their extreme toxicity and environmental persistence. The discovery escalated the situation from harassment to potential felony charges for possession of illegal chemicals with intent to cause harm. Officer Hernandez took over the case from there. Environmental crime specialists tested soil samples throughout my property to ensure no contamination had occurred. "This isn't a neighborhood dispute anymore," one of them told me gravely. "This is serious criminal activity." The next morning, Karen made one final desperate move via she called 911, claiming I was dealing illegal substances and threatening residents. Officer Heron and his team arrived to find me prepared, badge in hand, and all the evidence laid out. Karen approached with a smug smile, certain she'd finally won. That smile vanished when she saw the arrest warrant in my hand. Officer Hernandez read her the charges: malicious property destruction, multiple false reports to authorities, HOA fund embezzlement, real estate fraud and bribery, and the possession of banned hazardous chemicals with intent to harm. Nearly the entire neighborhood watched as she was led away in handcuffs, her face a mask of disbelief. Brandon watched in horror as his mother was placed in the back of the police car. Greg stood silently, making no move to intervene. In that moment, I felt no triumph, only relief that the threat to Noah and our home was finally over, and sadness for a family torn apart by one person's greed and obsession. Karen screamed about her rights and connections as she was led away, but the damage was done. The HOA board was dissolved and reformed with Daniel Foster, a retired judge, as the new president. They rewrote the bylaws to support green initiatives and foster genuine community. Noah, his confidence restored, started a kids' garden club at school with his teacher's help. I expanded our project into the Maria Community Garden, named for my wife's memory, with several families joining in. In the aftermath, we learned the full extent of Karen's scheme. Westfield had promised her a lucrative role as community relations director, over $100,000 a year plus commissions once the development was approved. The company distanced itself from her, claiming ignorance of her tactics. But internal emails told a different story. Several Westfield executives faced charges, and the company's reputation was irreparably damaged. My farm was recognized as a model for the county's urban agriculture program. Greg, burdened by guilt, sold their house to pay legal fees and moved away with Brandon. Karen eventually pleaded guilty to reduced charges and was sentenced to 500 hours of community service. Ironically, at the community garden she had tried to destroy. Westfield's CEO was investigated, the luxury condo project was cancelled, and the area was rezoned as a community park. The Maria Community Garden expanded to include a teaching pavilion, where we hosted workshops on sustainable agriculture. The county funded a pilot program to replicate our model in other neighborhoods, creating a network of urban farms that tackled food insecurity and taught environmental stewardship. Noah blossomed, earning the nickname the garden expert at school and developing a passion for preserving heirloom seeds. He talked freely about Maria now, sharing her gardening tips and memories with his friends. One afternoon, while we watched monarch butterflies fluttering around our milkweed patch, he said softly, "Mom would have loved how many butterflies we have now." A year later, we hosted a celebration for the first anniversary of the Maria Community Garden. Dozens of families came, children running through rows of vegetables. A new family had moved into Karen's old house and tentatively joined in. Noah led the new kids on a tour of the chickens and vegetable beds while I chatted with neighbors. A local reporter, there to cover the event for the evening news, asked me, "How do you feel about your program being replicated across the county?" Camera crews filmed children harvesting tomatoes and learning about composting. Noah even gave an articulate interview about his chicken Carotenia. His initial shyness gone. Standing there, watching him speak so confidently, I felt sure Maria could see him too. A strong, compassionate, and unafraid to share his knowledge. The garden had healed us in ways I never imagined possible. I watched Noah teach the new children how to pick the ripest tomatoes, and I smiled. I realized then that sometimes the best fertilizer isn't compost, it's the courage to stand up for what's right, and enough love to build something that lasts. I looked up at the sky, as if speaking to Maria. It's the love that builds a community, I whispered, instead of tearing it down. As the celebration carried on around me, I felt her presence in every thriving plant, every laugh, and most of all, in the bright, confident smile of our son. The nightmare with Karen had transformed into something beautiful, proof that even the ugliest situations can nurture the most unexpected growth with enough care, courage, and determination. And those security cameras, they're still there, but now they only capture moments of joy and connection just the way Maria would have wanted.